Welcome back to V8 Creative and part 12 of the Ultima RS build. Now clearly I'm not in my virtual study, but I'm walking my creative director before I spend a day in the Dean Den. And on this week's episode, I'm going to be focusing on luggage containers. Back from our walk, my creative director is flat out in his bed. He is exhausted. So for part 12 of the Ultima RS build, we're focusing on luggage bins. Now, luggage bins are an option on the Ultima RS, but I would recommend them for anyone building this hypercar, and that's for two very good reasons. Firstly, it gives you a bit of space for luggage. Now, I'm talking about a soft bag for a weekend away, or if you go out getting the creative director treats or anything like that. But what they also do is provide additional side impact protection, because each luggage container is built of fairly thick gauge aluminium and is pot riveted by no less than about 90 pot rivets each. Yes, more pot riveting. So without further ado, let's get spannering. We're going to start by fitting the luggage container to the passenger side. Now, as you're going to see in a minute, when I'm going to be trying to fit this thing, it's almost like a Rubik's Cube puzzle, I promise you. And the reason why that is there are lots of chassis members. There is also coolant pipes. There's also loom runs, wiring, hydraulic pipes, and all those must be avoided by this big aluminium bin. So there's going to be templates, there's going to be trimming, and to protect this lovely chassis, you will see I've put masking tape on the chassis members that are exposed. So today is qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix, so there's going to be a lot of background music, so apologies for those of you, because if I have F1 on in the background, Liberty Media will come after me. Anyway, let's start. Now, an angle grinder may look a bit aggressive for doing this job, but what I find is on this thicker gauge aluminium, if you use tin snips, you tend to get a bit of a curl, and if you use a jigsaw, it can pull on the aluminium. So I'm using these DeWalt aluminium cutting blades, which I must say do a really nice job, even though they're a bit loud, to be honest.
What better way to rock than this?
So there we have it. The first fitment of the passenger side luggage compartment. Now I'm very pleased because using the set square, this sits absolutely perfectly. So well engineered box that. Now I must say, I may have made a slight mistake, but I had to do it to get the box in. If you see here and here, I had to cut these tabs shorter to get them past these cross members. Now arguably this will weaken the connection between this luggage compartment tab and the chassis here and here. However, all the way along here there's a piece of right angle. So there's rivets all the way along here, so I'm not over worried about that. But what I'm going to do is tidy this up this end. I must say it fits superbly. Shout out to Ultima there. It's perfect room for the pipes running through. Superb. Right, well, let's start putting in a couple of the rivets then. So what we're looking at here is the end of the passenger side luggage compartment. And what we need to do is put 4 holes near this inside edge. And here are the grommets, which I'll put in once the holes have been drilled. The top 2 holes are for the supply and return of the water to the heater. And these 2 holes, well, these 2 holes I've put in preparation for the very special treatment I have in store for my power plant. Now, rather than drill these holes, which is always very difficult when the holes are fairly large, what I've done is I've purchased a 27.5mm hole punch. And these are superb little tools, cost about £10, about $12. And what they do is you drill a smaller hole through this panel, you then slot the top half of the punch through, spin the bottom half through, and then using an Allen key, you wind through these jaws, which then punch out the hole. So, let me show you how that works. Now I have the 4 holes in either end of this luggage container. What I need to do now is put saddles, which look like this, down the entire length of this storage container in 4 rows. And these need to line up with those large holes because these have the coolant hoses or the other hoses sat on top and then a zip tie put around to actually hold. There we go. Look at that. Now, as I said before, these bottom 2, I've left them blank. So these saddles here will have nothing on them. Whereas the 2 runs at the top will have the hot supply and return. Now we have all the saddles pop riveted to the side of the luggage container. We spin it upside down. And on the bottom, what we do is we rivet on this blanking plate. And what this does, it spans the space between the luggage compartment and the bottom chassis member, which is where the large coolant tube runs from the engine to the radiator. Now, the reason for doing this is twofold. Firstly, what it does is it encases all the loom and wires and coolant pipe in here to protect them. And also secondly, what it does is it adds huge rigidity to this box section here, which in itself provides side impact protection. And by adding this, adds huge strength to it. So the next thing I have to do is mark holes along here and along here, drill and get ready to rivet again. Missed one. 87 rivets later and the luggage bin is in place. It's a hardy piece of kit, I tell you, very rigid. Now, the next job is to feed the supply and the return of the coolant pipe to the heater matrix. Now, the supply goes through the uppermost hole and goes along these saddles, comes out the other end and goes into the bottom feed of the matrix. And then the return, which is the top, then comes through on the second hole down and does the reverse. And in this area here on the return, we add an actual valve which is operated by a Bowden cable underneath the dashboard here. So what I'm going to do first is feed the pipes through, and I'll give you a close-up of how those pipes are attached towards those saddles. Now this is the valve here, and it shows a small arrow, direction of travel. Ultima have put that on. So because this is the return, it goes in this orientation. Now what you can see here is I have connected the Bowden cable, cut it off to the right length, and the outer is held by this clamp here, and then the inner steel wire has been wrapped around, you can just see here, the actuator pin, and then I've added this little grommet actually to stop it coming loose in use. What I've done here is drilled a hole where I marked earlier through the end of the luggage bin and put a grommet in and then fed through the Bowden cable. I've cut the outer to the right length and then clamped it with this clamp on the end of the valve. The inner I've then cut to slightly over length and then wrapped it around this actuating arm. So if I now pull the heater knob in the car, you can see it opening the flow of coolant, and if I close, it closes the flow off. So open, closed. And that's the luggage container complete. There we go, another week complete. A luggage bin installed, and I'm going to spare you the driver's side luggage bin installation because it's exactly the same. Well, pretty much exactly the same. The only slight difference is the air conditioning feed and return goes through that driver's side bin, and also leaving space for the engine harness to go from the rear of the car to the front. But more about that when I install the engine. So for next week, part 13, we're going to be looking at carpet. I know it sounds a bit weird, but I will explain why carpet is very important in the next stage. So I'll be also putting in handbrake cables, focusing on the footrest and really concentrating on the inside of the car. So thank you again to all of you subscribers. Thank you again for all the thumbs up. And in 2 weeks' time, I'll be back with another episode.